trail had been long and hard. 6 months of driving cattle across the Texas Panhandle, through dust storms and river crossings, through nights under stars so thick they looked like spilled milk across the sky. Caleb Hartley had done this work for nearly a decade, moving from one cattle drive to the next, always moving, never settling. He had told himself it was the life he wanted, the open range, the freedom, the absence of roots that could be torn up. But as his horse crested the final ridge and he looked down at the small cabin he had built with his own hands 4 years ago, something in his chest tightened. He was tired of the trail, tired of the loneliness that followed him like a shadow. The cabin sat in the curve of a shallow valley, nestled against a grove of cottonwoods that followed the creek. He had chosen this spot because it was isolated, because no one would find him here unless he wanted to be found. It had been his sanctuary, a place where a man could be alone with his thoughts and his memories. But as he rode closer, something made him pull up short. He squinted against the late afternoon sun, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle in his saddle scabbard. Smoke was rising from the chimney, thin, steady, purposeful. Someone had built a fire in his hearth. Someone was inside his home. His first thought was squatters, men who had stumbled upon an empty cabin and decided to make it their own. It happened sometimes on the frontier. A man left for the season and came back to find his cabin occupied, his supplies taken, his solitude violated. He had heard stories of men coming home to find their doors barred against them, their own homes turned against them by strangers who had no claim and no shame. He dismounted slowly, his boots silent on the packed earth, and drew his revolver from his holster. He moved toward the cabin with the practiced caution of a man who had learned to expect the worst. He circled the cabin first, checking the windows, looking for signs of how many people he might be dealing with. The shutters were closed on all but one window, and that one was dark. He saw no horses in the small corral, no saddles on the porch, no evidence of the kind of men who would claim a cabin as their own. That made it worse, somehow. If there were no horses, whoever was inside had come on foot, which meant they were either desperate or dangerous. He moved to the door, his heart pounding in his chest, and pressed his ear against the rough wood. He heard nothing. No voices, no movement, no sound at all. Just the crackle of the fire he could see smoking from the chimney. He reached for the latch, his revolver raised, and pushed the door open in one swift motion. The door swung inward with a groan that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. He stepped inside, his weapon ready, his eyes scanning the room for threats. What he saw made him stop dead in his tracks. The fire was burning in the hearth, casting a warm glow across the cabin. The floor had been swept clean. His table was set with 2 plates, 2 cups, a loaf of bread, and a pot of something that smelled like stew. And in the chair by the fire, his chair, the one he had built with his own hands, a woman sat with a small child in her arms, both of them staring at him with wide, frightened eyes. For a long moment, no one moved. The woman was young, perhaps 25, with dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders, and a face that was striking despite the fear etched into it. She wore a simple dress that had been mended more than once, and her hands were wrapped protectively around the child, a girl, maybe 3 years old, with the same dark hair and eyes that seemed too old for her small face. Caleb lowered his revolver slowly, his mind racing through possibilities. They were not squatters. Squatters did not clean the cabin. Squatters did not set a table for 2 and wait for someone who might never come. These were not thieves. These were refugees. The woman found her voice first. "Please," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "Please don't hurt us. We didn't know anyone lived here. The storm came, and the cabin was empty, and my daughter was cold. I only meant to stay until the rain stopped. I was going to leave before you returned." Caleb looked at her, then at the child, then at the fire that had warmed his home for the first time in 6 months. He holstered his revolver and took a step forward, keeping his movements slow, deliberate, non-threatening. "There's no storm," he said quietly. She shook her head, confusion flickering across her face. It passed. 3 days ago. I've been waiting 3 days. She had been in his cabin for 3 days, cleaning, cooking, making a home of a place that had been empty for so long. He looked at the table again, at the 2 plates set with such care, and something in his chest tightened. "Who are you?" he asked. The woman looked down at the child in her arms, and when she looked up again, there were tears in her eyes. "My name is Eliza. This is my daughter, Sarah." She paused, as if weighing whether to say more. "We were traveling with a wagon train headed west. We were attacked. Raiders. They took everything. They killed." Her voice broke, and she could not finish the sentence. Caleb did not need her to. He had seen what raiders did to wagon trains. He had ridden through the aftermath of such attacks, seen the wagons burned, the bodies scattered, the survivors left with nothing but their grief. The fact that this woman and her child had made it this far alone, on foot, was a miracle of endurance he could barely comprehend. He looked at the child, who had buried her face in her mother's shoulder, and at the mother, who was trying so hard to be brave, and he felt something shift inside him, something he had not felt in a very long time. He walked to the hearth, added another log to the fire, and sat down across from them. "You must be hungry," he said. She nodded, and he rose to ladle stew into the bowls on the table. He set one before her and one before the child, who peeked out from her mother's shoulder at the steam rising from the bowl. Caleb sat back in his chair, watching the meat. The woman ate slowly at first, as if afraid the food might disappear if she reached for it too quickly. But hunger won out, and soon she was eating with the desperate focus of someone who had not had a proper meal in days. The child ate with her fingers, smearing stew across her face, and for the first time since he had entered the cabin, Caleb saw the woman smile. A small, fragile thing, but a smile nonetheless. When they had finished, Eliza looked at him across the table, her eyes still wary but softer now. "You're not angry," she said. It was not a question, but there was wonder in her voice. Caleb shook his head slowly. "I was angry when I saw the smoke," he admitted. "I thought someone had taken what was mine. But when I opened the door and saw you, I realized I wasn't angry anymore." He looked at the fire, then back at her. "A cabin is just boards and nails. A home is something else. This place hasn't felt like a home in a long time." He did not say more, but something in his voice must have reached her, because her expression softened. The child, Sarah, had fallen asleep against her mother's chest, her small face peaceful for the first time since he had arrived. Eliza looked down at her, then back at Caleb. "I should go," she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. "I've imposed on your hospitality long enough." Caleb looked out the window at the fading light, at the empty miles of desert between this cabin and anything resembling civilization. "Where would you go?" he asked quietly. She had no answer for that. She looked down at her daughter, and he saw the weight of her situation pressing down on her, a woman alone, with a child, in a land that had no mercy for the weak. Caleb stood up and walked to the chest by his bed, pulling out a spare blanket and a pillow. He laid them on the floor near the fire. "You'll stay tonight," he said, and his voice left no room for argument. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." Eliza looked at him for a long moment, searching for something in his face pity, perhaps, or the kind of kindness that came with expectations. Whatever she was looking for, she did not find it. She nodded slowly and laid her daughter on the blanket, covering her with a corner of the wool. Then she sat back against the wall, her eyes fixed on the fire, her thoughts clearly far away. Caleb sat in his chair, watching the flames, and for the first time in 6 months, the silence of the cabin did not feel empty. It felt like something waiting to be filled. He found himself stealing glances at the woman across the room, at the way the firelight caught the strands of silver in her dark hair, at the way her hands lay folded in her lap hands that had lost everything and somehow kept holding on. He had spent years running from the kind of connection that sat across from him now, telling himself that solitude was freedom, that loneliness was a small price to pay for independence. But looking at her now, he was not so sure. The night passed slowly. Caleb did not sleep. He sat in his chair, watching the fire die down to embers, watching the rise and fall of the child's breath, watching the woman's face in the flickering light. He thought about the life he had built here, the isolation, the silence, the long empty nights when the only sound was the wind against the walls. He had told himself it was enough. He had told himself he did not need anyone. But when he had walked through that door and seen the table set for two, the fire burning, the woman and child waiting in the warmth, he had felt something he had not allowed himself to feel in years. He had felt like he was coming home. Morning came slowly, the light creeping through the cracks in the shutters, painting stripes of gold across the cabin floor. Caleb was still in his chair when Eliza stirred, her eyes finding him immediately, as if she had been waiting for him to disappear. He had not. She sat up slowly, careful not to wake her daughter, and looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "You stayed," she said softly. Caleb nodded. "I was worried, in case you needed something." She looked at him for a long moment, and something passed between them, an understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of one. "No one has worried about me in a very long time," she said, and her voice was so quiet he almost missed it. The child woke soon after, rubbing her eyes and looking around the unfamiliar cabin with the unself-conscious curiosity of the very young. When her eyes landed on Caleb, she did not cry or hide. She simply looked at him, then at her mother, then back at him. "Who's that?" she asked, her voice small but clear. Eliza hesitated, her eyes meeting Caleb's. He saw the question in them. "What do I tell her?" And before he could think about what he was doing, he answered. "My name is Caleb," he said, kneeling down to the child's level. "I live here, and you're welcome to stay as long as you like." The child looked at her mother, who nodded slowly, and then she smiled, a real smile, the kind that lit up a face. That day, Caleb showed them the creek where he drew water, the small garden where he grew vegetables in the spring, the corral where his horses rested. He watched Eliza as she moved through his world, her eyes taking in everything, her hands touching nothing, as if she was afraid of leaving a mark. When they returned to the cabin, she helped him prepare the evening meal, their movements falling into an easy rhythm that surprised them both. They talked as they worked about the wagon train, about the life she had left behind, about the future she had imagined for her daughter. She did not ask about his past, and he did not offer it, but somehow, in the silence between the words, they learned each other anyway. Days turned into weeks. The cabin that had been a prison of silence became something else entirely filled with the sound of a child's laughter, the clatter of pots in the kitchen, the soft murmur of a woman's voice singing old songs from a life before loss. Caleb found himself looking forward to the evenings when the three of them would sit by the fire, Sarah curled in her mother's lap, and he would read from the warm Bible his own mother had given him years ago. He did not know if Eliza believed in God, and he was not sure he did either, but there was something in the ritual that felt sacred. They were building something here, a family perhaps, or the possibility of one. One evening, as the sun set behind the cottonwoods and the sky turned the color of honey, Eliza came to stand beside him on the porch. Sarah was already asleep inside, and the cabin behind them glowed with the light of the fire. "I should leave," she said, but her voice was soft, and she made no move to go. Caleb looked at her, at the woman who had come to his cabin with nothing but her daughter and her courage, who had turned a house of solitude into a home. "You could stay," he said, the words coming out before he could stop them. She turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "Why?" she asked, and there was no accusation in her voice, only wonder. Caleb reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers closing gently around hers. "Because when I came home and saw smoke rising from the chimney," he said slowly, "I was angry. But when I opened the door and saw you, I realized I had been waiting for that smoke my whole life. I just didn't know it." Eliza looked at him for a long, breathless moment, and then she smiled. The same smile her daughter had given him that first morning, the kind that lit up a face, the kind that promised something new. She did not say yes, and she did not say no. She simply squeezed his hand and leaned her head against his shoulder. And together, they watched the sun sink below the desert. Two people who had found, in the smoke rising from a chimney, something they had both stopped looking for, a reason to stay.